As the evening progressed in the charming Walker home, the birthday celebration for Mary, the family matriarch, continued in full swing. Located in a serene suburban neighborhood in the United States, the house was filled with the sounds of cheerful chatter and laughter. The occasion was special. Mary was turning 60, a milestone that had brought together family and close friends to honor her strong-willed nature and notable opinions. Mary, with her neatly arranged gray hair and warm smile, moved through the crowd, ensuring everyone felt welcomed and cared for. Despite the soothing background music and lively conversations, there was an undercurrent of subtle tension, a delicate thread of unease that only those familiar with the family dynamics might detect. Laura, Mary's daughter, arrived with her husband, Mark. Married for 3 years, they were often seen as the ideal couple. Mark, always dapper and good-humored, worked as an attorney at a prestigious firm. Laura, a gifted photographer, had an eye for capturing life's special moments. She wore a simple yet elegant dress that highlighted her natural beauty. Together, they made an attractive pair, mingling with guests and sharing polite smiles. As guests wandered through the rooms, enjoying the carefully selected hors d'oeuvres and beverages, the atmosphere was relaxed. The buffet table was laden with delights. Mini sandwiches, canapés, intricately decorated cakes, and a wide array of sweets. Mary, with her affectionate gaze, noted every detail, ensuring the evening was perfect. However, beneath the festive surface, subtle glances exchanged among some family members hinted at unresolved issues. The smiles, though broad, held an undercurrent of unspoken tension, a spark of something unsaid. Laura and Mark, while maintaining their appearance as the perfect couple, exchanged knowing looks, each seemingly aware of the delicate balance they needed to maintain. As the night went on, laughter and conversations about old memories and future plans filled the air. Children played in the garden, taking advantage of the outdoor space, while adults engaged in deep discussions. The music provided a gentle backdrop, mingling with the clinks of glasses and warm greetings. Despite the seemingly flawless setting, the silent tension lingered, like a shadow refusing to fade, casting a slight pall over the otherwise joyous celebration. The evening was lively, filled with laughter and animated conversations. People were scattered around the room, some dancing, others enjoying the delicious food on the table. Mary moved through the crowd, warmly greeting everyone. However, as the night progressed, Mary's demeanor changed. She became more serious, and her friendly expression shifted to one of concern and determination. Suddenly, Mary stood up from her place at the center of the room and with a firm and authoritative tone, called everyone's attention. "Everyone, I need to say something important." The chatter immediately stopped, and all eyes turned to her. Laura, standing beside Mark, looked confused and worried. Mark, meanwhile, remained calm, though a shadow of discomfort crossed his face. Mary took a deep breath and in a grave and accusatory voice, said, "I didn't want this night to end like this, but I can't keep this to myself any longer. Mark, I know what you've done. I have evidence that you're cheating on my daughter, Laura." The silence that followed was almost palpable. The guests' faces transformed into masks of shock and disbelief. Some murmured among themselves, but most remained silent, trying to process what had just been said. Laura, her eyes wide and mouth agape, looked at her mother, incredulous. "Mom, what are you talking about? This can't be true." She looked at Mark, searching for an explanation, but he remained silent, his face tense. "Mark?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. Mark raised his hands, trying to stay calm. "Mary, you must be mistaken. I love Laura. I would never do anything to hurt her. This is a misunderstanding." His voice was calm, but there was an underlying note of desperation. Mary, however, did not back down. "I wish it were a misunderstanding, Mark. But the evidence is clear. I've received messages, photos. You can't deny it." She shook her head, visibly disappointed. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react. The party, once joyful and lively, was now engulfed in a dense tension. The atmosphere was one of expectation and discomfort, as everyone awaited the next move. Laura, struggling to maintain her composure, turned to Mark and asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Is this true? Did you cheat on me?" Mark, eyes wide with disbelief and forehead furrowed in incredulity, tried to defend himself. "This is absurd, Mary. I would never cheat on Laura," he exclaimed, his voice laden with surprise and confusion. He looked at Laura, trying to convey sincerity. "Laura, you know I love you. This is all a big misunderstanding." Laura, her hands trembling, looked at Mark and her mother, visibly shaken. Her eyes were teary, and she seemed lost amidst a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "But Mom, what if it's true? How can you be so sure?" Her voice was weak, almost a whisper, as she tried to process the accusations. Mary, resolute and determined, shook her head and stepped forward. "Laura, I would never bring this up without concrete proof, she declared, pulling some sheets of paper and a cell phone from her pocket. Here are the text messages he exchanged with another woman. And these are the photos showing Mark meeting with her. There's no denying it. She handed over the evidence, and the silence in the room grew even heavier. Hesitantly, Laura took the papers and began reading the messages. Her face paled as she recognized Mark's number and the content of the conversations. Is this really from your phone, Mark? She looked at him, her voice breaking with pain. Mark, feeling the tension rise, shook his head emphatically. These messages could have been faked. Someone could be framing me. I would never do anything to hurt you, Laura. You know that. He tried to approach her, but Laura recoiled, clutching the papers tightly. The argument intensified, with Mary insisting that the evidence was clear and undeniable. I also thought he would never do this, Laura. But the proof is here. I can't just ignore what I've found. Mary looked at Mark with a mixture of disappointment and anger. You lied to my daughter, and now you have the nerve to lie in front of everyone? The guests, previously bewildered, were now caught in a mix of shock and discomfort. Murmurs of concern and surprise echoed through the room as everyone watched the drama unfold. Laura, increasingly disoriented, looked around, searching for some form of support or explanation. This can't be happening, she murmured, almost to herself, as the pain of the potential betrayal began to show on her face. Mary's revelation hit the room like a bomb, leaving everyone in shock. The once festive atmosphere had turned tense and laden with emotions. Some family members rose from their seats, exchanging confused glances and murmuring among themselves. The silence was broken by heated voices as people began to take sides. Some stood by Mary, convinced that she wouldn't make such a serious accusation without solid evidence. She would never lie about something like this, said one of Laura's aunts, her expression indignant. Mark always had a suspicious air about him. Others, however, defended Mark, unable to believe he could betray Laura. Mark has always been a good husband and a great son-in-law, argued one of the uncles, his face showing disbelief. These proofs could be fake. Nowadays, anyone can manipulate messages. Laura, visibly shaken, was at the center of the emotional storm. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process what was happening. I just need some time to think, she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. This is all too much for me. She turned to Mark, her gaze a mix of pain and confusion. Mark, I don't know what to believe right now, she said, struggling. Please, I need you to leave the house for a while until all of this is sorted out. I need space to think. Mark, feeling the weight of the accusations and the family's gaze upon him, took a deep breath. Although clearly indignant, he made an effort to keep his composure. Laura, I would never do this to you. I will prove my innocence, he responded, his voice firm but tinged with sadness. I'll leave the house, but I will fight to clear my name. I can't believe this is happening. With a heavy heart, Mark grabbed his keys and walked toward the door. The room was silent except for murmurs and gasps of shock from those present. Mary, arms crossed and with a look of determination, watched the scene unfold. Laura, sobbing, looked to her relatives, seeking some comfort amid the turmoil. Emotions were running high, and the tension was palpable as Mark walked out the door, leaving everyone in a state of uncertainty and discomfort. In the days following the tense revelation, Mark was determined to prove his innocence at all costs. He hired a renowned private investigator, set on uncovering the truth behind the accusations. I can't let my life fall apart over something I didn't do, he told the detective during their first meeting. I need to clear my name and regain Laura's trust. The detective, an experienced and meticulous man, assured him he would do everything possible to find the truth, starting with examining the text messages and photos Mary had presented as evidence. Meanwhile, Laura was going through an emotional whirlwind. She could hardly believe what was happening. The home that had once been a haven of tranquility now felt suffocating and full of uncertainty. She spent hours in silence, staring into space, trying to understand how her life had turned upside down. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but at the same time, she recalled the happy moments she had shared with Mark. How could he have done this to me? She wondered amidst her tears. Mary, on the other hand, stood firm in her accusations. She was convinced she had done the right thing by exposing Mark's supposed infidelity. I couldn't let my daughter continue living a lie, she told a close friend who came to visit and offer support. She deserves to know the truth, even if it hurts. Mary was adamant that Laura should sever all ties with Mark. The relationship between mother and daughter became strained. Laura felt torn between her loyalty to her mother, who had always been a strong and protective figure in her life, and her love for Mark, the man with whom she had built a life. Mom, what if there's an explanation? Laura asked in desperation during one of their many arguments in the following days. Mary, with a resolute and determined look, replied, Laura, I've seen the evidence. You need to face reality. The Walker home, once filled with laughter and warmth, was now shrouded in a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Laura could barely focus on her work as a photographer, and every call or message on her phone made her jump with anxiety, hoping for some development that might clarify the situation. She felt divided, not knowing whom to trust or what to do next. The investigator worked tirelessly, examining every detail of the text messages and photos that Mary had presented. After days of meticulous analysis and comparison with technical records, he finally made a surprising discovery. The evidence was fake. Someone had manipulated the messages and edited the photos to incriminate Mark. Mark was stunned upon hearing the news from the investigator. "This is unbelievable," he said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Who could want to do something like this to me? And why?" The investigator, a calm and experienced man, placed his hands on the table, looking directly at Mark. "Someone clearly intended to harm you," he said seriously. "The messages were created to look authentic, but there are subtle details, like the letter formatting and some syntax errors, that reveal the forgery. And the photos, they were edited, and the metadata confirms it." Mark took a deep breath, trying to process the information. "This explains a lot," he murmured, more to himself than to the investigator. "But now we need to find out who did this. I can't rest until the truth comes out." The investigator nodded, agreeing with Mark's determination. "Agreed. Let's start by reviewing who would have access to your personal information. It could be someone close, someone who had a motive to incriminate you." Mark thought for a moment, the expression on his face shifting from surprise to determination. "I'll help with whatever it takes. This has to end. I need to prove to Laura and everyone that I'm not guilty." "We'll uncover the truth, Mark," the investigator assured him, standing up. "We'll expose this person and restore your reputation." Mark stood up as well, filled with new energy. "Let's do this," he affirmed, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I'll show everyone that these accusations are false. And I'll find out who is behind this plot." Mark, with the investigator by his side, returned to Laura and Mary's house, determined to reveal the truth. The air was thick with tension as he rang the doorbell. Laura opened the door, visibly nervous. "Mark, what are you doing here?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. "We need to talk," Mark said firmly. "We've discovered something important, and you and your mother need to know." Laura nodded, allowing them to enter. Inside the house, Mary was sitting on the sofa with a serious expression. Seeing Mark enter with the investigator, she narrowed her eyes, clearly suspicious. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone challenging. "I hope this isn't another attempt to avoid the truth." Mark took a deep breath and looked directly at her. "Mary, Laura, we have proof that the messages and photos you used to accuse me are false. Someone manipulated everything to incriminate me." He handed some documents to the investigator, who began to explain. "The material was meticulously analyzed," said the investigator in a professional tone. "We found inconsistencies in the photo metadata and syntax errors in the messages. It is clear that someone forged this evidence." Laura, glancing at the documents and then at her mother, was stunned. "Mom, is this true?" she stammered, her voice filled with confusion and anguish. Mary, despite her apparent confusion, remained firm. "I don't know what to say," she began, her expression impenetrable. "I received this information from a reliable source. I believed it was legitimate." Mark furrowed his brow, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. "Mary, I don't know who did this, but I can assure you it wasn't me. I never cheated on Laura, and now we have proof that someone set up this situation." Mary looked down, clearly disturbed. I just wanted to protect my daughter," she murmured, shaking her head. "I didn't imagine it could be a hoax." Laura, in shock, put her hands on her head. How could this happen? Who would want to do something like this? She turned to Mark, tears in her eyes. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to think." Mark stepped forward, softening his tone. "I understand, Laura. I just want the truth to come out. We'll find out who did this and why." He looked again at Mary, hoping she would grasp the seriousness of the situation. "I won't rest until the person responsible for this lie is exposed." As the investigation continued, a crucial new lead emerged. The investigator spent hours reviewing access logs and tracing the origin of the falsified files. Eventually, he discovered something surprising. The incriminating evidence had been sent from a computer in the Walker household. This revelation raised a series of new questions and suspicions. Sitting in his office with a serious expression, the investigator called Mark to share the discovery. "Mark, we have new information," he said, his voice heavy with gravity. "The data was sent from a device in the Walker house. This means someone with access to the house might be involved." Mark was silent for a moment, processing the news. So, you're saying that someone in the family or someone who frequents the house could have done this? He felt a wave of disbelief and discomfort at the possibility. Exactly, the investigator confirmed. We'll need to speak with everyone living in the house and possibly even frequent visitors. Someone had both the access and the motive to frame you, and now we need to find out who and why. The next day, Mark and the investigator returned to the Walker house to confront Laura and Mary with this new discovery. Gathered in the living room, where the atmosphere was a mix of tension and anticipation, the investigator explained the situation. We traced the origin of the forged evidence to a computer here in the house, he announced. This means someone inside might be behind this. Mary's eyes widened in surprise and distress. This is absurd. Who would do such a thing? She exclaimed, looking around as if expecting to see an answer written on the walls. Laura, her face pale, began to bite her lip, nervous. It doesn't make sense. Who would have a motive to do this? She murmured, more to herself than to the others. The thought that someone she trusted might be involved was terrifying. Mark remained calm, but his eyes showed a mix of sadness and determination. Someone here wanted to harm me, he said firmly. And we'll find out who. I won't rest until this person is found and the truth comes out. The investigator looked at Mary and Laura, their faces tense. We need to understand who might have had an interest in creating this conflict, he continued. Someone who had access and wanted to harm Mark. Now, we'll need full cooperation to resolve this. After a series of meticulous investigations, the investigator finally uncovered the truth behind the false evidence. The revelation was shocking and unexpected for everyone. The mastermind behind the entire plot was James, Laura's older brother. The news hit the family like a bombshell, leaving everyone stunned. James had always been a reserved figure, but no one could have imagined that he harbored such deep resentment. Over the years, he had silently watched as Mark gained more and more prominence within the family, winning the affection and respect of everyone, especially Laura and their parents. This created a feeling of jealousy and exclusion in James, who felt that his own role in the family was diminishing. Driven by this envy and resentment, James decided to take drastic action. He devised a plan to frame Mark, believing that by removing him, he could regain the attention and affection he felt he had lost. Using his technical knowledge, James forged the text messages and manipulated the photos, creating a convincing narrative of betrayal. He was sure that once the false evidence was discovered, Mark would be driven out of Laura's life and the family. When the investigator revealed these findings, the atmosphere was charged with tension and disbelief. Laura was in shock, trying to process the idea that her own brother was behind it all. James, how could you do this? She whispered, her voice choked with emotion. You're my brother. I never imagined. James, initially calm, began to tremble, his face pale. He tried to justify his actions, but his words came out in a jumble. I just wanted things to go back to how they were, he stammered, avoiding Laura's gaze. Since Mark came along, everything changed. I felt forgotten. Mary, still processing the revelation, shook her head in disbelief. James, you went too far, she said, with a mix of sadness and disappointment in her voice. Why didn't you just talk to us? Why choose this path? James had no answers. He looked at the floor, feeling the weight of his actions bearing down on him. The guilt and regret were palpable on his face. The truth had finally come out, and now everyone had to deal with the devastating consequences of his actions. The investigator had meticulously detailed James's connection to the forged evidence, revealing digital traces and file manipulations. The tension in the room was palpable, and the silence was thick with anticipation. James, with a pale face and tearful eyes, lifted his head and looked at Laura and Mary. His voice came out as a whisper, heavy with shame and regret. I did it, he confessed, his eyes wavering. I forged the messages and the photos. I'm the one responsible. Laura, with a look of shock and pain, took a step back, tears beginning to flow down her face. No, it can't be true, she stammered, her voice trembling. Why did you do this, James? What did we do to deserve this? James looked at his sister, his voice nearly breaking. I couldn't stand seeing Mark getting so much attention, he began, struggling to find the right words. He was always in the spotlight, while I felt ignored. I was afraid of losing my place in the family to him. Mary, standing beside him, appeared to be in shock, her face showing clear signs of disbelief and pain. James, how could you? She asked, her voice filled with sadness and disillusionment. My own son. You were willing to destroy a life because of your jealousy? James, tears streaming down his face, looked at his mother, his regret apparent. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't think about the consequences. I just wanted things to go back to how they were, but I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. Mary sat down on the sofa, her hands covering her face as she struggled to control her emotions. You put everyone through hell, she said, her voice choked. You broke the trust of our family and caused immense suffering to Laura and Mark. How can you fix this? James shook his head, unsure of what to say. I don't know how to fix it, he admitted, his voice filled with guilt. I just hope that one day you can forgive me. I understand if you can't. I'm just so sorry for everything. The room was immersed in a painful silence, the weight of James's words and the impact of his actions becoming increasingly evident. The devastation in the family was clear as everyone tried to process the deep wound caused by James's betrayal. After the truth was revealed, the atmosphere in the Walker household was filled with a mix of relief and sadness. Mark, finally free from the false accusations that had tarnished his reputation, could breathe a sigh of relief. The sense of injustice that had loomed over him for so long began to dissipate, though the scars were still visible. Laura, with a heavy heart and still in shock, approached Mark. The two sat in a quiet corner of the room, away from the curious glances and nervous conversations happening in the background. Mark, I don't know what to say, Laura began, her voice trembling. I was so confused and hurt. The truth is, I still can't believe my brother did this. Mark looked at her with understanding and shared pain. I understand, Laura. I can't believe he did this either, he said, his voice soft. But what matters now is that we're here, and I want to try to rebuild what was destroyed. Laura took a deep breath, trying to gather her emotions. I've decided to forgive you, she declared, tears filling her eyes. I know it wasn't your fault. I just need time to process everything that happened and to figure out how to move forward. Meanwhile, Mary was in a state of deep reflection and regret. She approached Mark and Laura, her gaze marked by pain and remorse. Mark, Laura, she began, her voice laden with emotion. I am so sorry for everything that happened. I never imagined the accusations were false, and I feel devastated for having caused so much suffering. Mark looked at her with a cautious acceptance. Mary, I understand that you were trying to protect your daughter, but the way everything was handled caused a lot of pain, he replied, his voice still tense. I hope we can move past this and move forward. Mary nodded, the sadness evident in her eyes. I promise I'll be more careful in the future. I should never have accused someone without absolute certainty, she said, her tone sincere. I know there are no words that can fix what was broken, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to try to repair the damage. The conversation, though laden with pain, also brought a glimpse of hope for the future. Laura and Mark were trying to find a way to rebuild trust and heal the open wounds, while Mary was striving to learn from her mistakes and prevent such tragedies from recurring. The journey to restore family harmony would be long and difficult, but the first step had been taken. As the family tried to heal from the wounds inflicted by betrayal, a new and shocking revelation emerged, uncovering even deeper layers of complexity within the Walker family. Determined to fully understand what had happened, Mark began his own parallel investigation. He wanted to ensure there were no more hidden secrets that could affect the rebuilding of his life. In his investigation, Mark discovered something disturbing. James had not acted alone. The truth was far more complicated than initially thought. Mark found evidence linking Mary, the matriarch of the family, to the manipulations. With a growing sense of disbelief, Mark reviewed documents and messages showing that Mary had secretly maintained a history of manipulations to protect her family and maintain control over everyone. The evidence revealed that Mary, in her desperate attempt to preserve family unity and her influence, had encouraged James to act against Mark. She had fueled James's feelings of jealousy and insecurity, using him as a pawn in her control game. Mary believed that by removing Mark, she could protect the family dynamic she thought essential for maintaining harmony, even though she had caused immense damage. Mark, now with a clearer view of the full picture, shared his findings with Laura. They were stunned to discover that Mary had not only wrongfully accused Mark but had also manipulated the situation from the beginning. Laura, you need to see this, Mark said, handing her the documents. Your mother. She was behind all of this. Laura looked at the papers, her shock turning into deep sadness. I never thought she was capable of something like this, Laura murmured, her voice trembling. This changes everything. The final revelation exposed the complex family dynamics and Mary's obsession with absolute control. The Walker family was now faced with a painful truth showing that the quest for control and protection had led to destructive and deceitful actions. Mark and Laura, stunned by the magnitude of the revelations, decided they needed time away from the family to focus on rebuilding their relationship and recovering from the inflicted pain. Meanwhile, Mary and James faced the consequences of their actions, confronting not only the destruction they had caused but also the need for deep reflection on the impact of their choices and the value of truth and trust. The journey to rebuild trust and harmony within the Walker family was more complex than ever, marked by exposed secrets and the painful quest for redemption.